Welcome back to Philosophy and Ethics in Games, the series where I break down the stories in some of our favorite games and ask the tough questions to figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'm Josh Bearheart Hawk, and today we're getting into the final episode of Telltale Games' The Walking Dead Season 3. In case you missed any of the previous episodes, I've linked a playlist in the description below. As I continue to break down the series, I'll add new videos to the playlist so you can find them all in one place. Season 3, Episode 5 of Telltale's The Walking Dead is called From the Gallows, and we once again dive into the past as the episode opens with a flashback. This time, we join Javier and David as they play dominos with their father around the kitchen table. There's some light banter and some below-the-belt jabs from David about Javier's financial situation, but the scene ultimately is meant to show us how Javier and David found out about their dad being sick with cancer. He's chosen not to undergo therapy, and his plan had been to keep the information from his family. All things considered, he seems to be rather lighthearted about the whole thing. Even so, David is extremely upset with his father for hiding the news. Now, medical issues are typically a really touchy thing, but I can understand where their dad is coming from to a point. Sure, he could tell everyone and make a big deal out of it, maybe even getting treatment that might prolong his life, but it's really his decision to make, as it's his life. He seems content with the life that he's lived, and he'd rather leave on his own terms without everyone making a big fuss about it. He's also worried about the expense, with the cost not being worth the small amount of time that he'd be likely to gain. To be honest, there's a whole conversation to be had here about healthcare in the United States specifically, how it causes more harm than it prevents at times. But those discussions are more suited for the political arena for the most part. One thing I will say from a philosophical and ethical standpoint is that Javier and David's dad should not have to worry about leaving behind mountains of debt just because he got sick. Any system that bankrupts people or puts them in a massive debt because of something out of their control is unethical. Full stop. This is especially true when the resources exist to cover these costs. Healthcare should never be hidden behind a paywall, and we need to do better. David gets really mad at his father for his decision, and the old man calms the situation before David once more pleads with him to at least consider treatment, and Javi is given the choice to either back David up or support his father's choice. And this is one of those good character moments in the season. Sure, supporting his father would be something Javi would prefer, but the right thing is to stand with David. Now, that'll get a lot of heat in the comments, I'm sure. There are plenty of people out there who just cannot stand David. Just like there were those who hated Jane, disliked Kenny or Lily, or name a character, you get the idea. But let's just step back from the episode for a moment and talk about that. It's super easy to pick a character that you like or hate and just roll with or against them. But doing that goes against the very idea of philosophy and ethics. It's picking a side and entrenching yourself in it with no regard for how right or wrong the position is. And that kind of attitude bleeds into the real world and affects everything from personal relationships to politics and professional situations. If you're the kind of person who thinks that you're absolutely right all the time, who thinks that your opinion on a person or even a character in a video game is infallible, and who refuses to change your mind after a simple surface-level appraisal that they are good, bad, or anything in between, then you're going to wind up being very miserable in the long run of life. As we discussed in the Are There Bad People video, actions matter, and we owe it to ourselves to refrain from judging people. It's natural to want to shout about how good or bad that you might think a character is, especially if you've got a strong opinion formed through playing the game a certain way or being told by one person or another about how good or bad a character is. But philosophy is all about stepping back from our views and really thinking through whether our beliefs are valid. David gets a lot of hate, mostly because he was written to be a bit of an antagonist in this season and because he has a lot of flaws. But there are plenty of families out there where David and Javi would be seen as a normal pair of brothers. They fight passionately. They're jealous of each other for various things. They come to blows at times. But they aren't some anomaly where either is super evil or super good. And while I'm using them as an example, There are so many other characters in this series and in other fictional worlds that this kind of reasoning can apply to. It's important because if we get into the habit of hating characters for surface flaws, with no introspection about who they truly are or why they do things a certain way, it becomes easy for life to imitate art, and we wind up passing easy judgments about real people in our own lives. By learning how to use empathy to understand a character's motivations, we learn how to use it with that difficult coworker, boss, classmate, or that family member we don't agree with. And it's that same empathy that I apply when choosing to side with David as Javier in the situation with their father. It's clear the old man wants to see his sons happy, to see them getting along just once before his life ends. And siding with David gives him some hope that they will be able to make it when he's gone. He even points that out when he and Javi are alone as David goes to get more beer. And, as if this opening to the season finale needs any more talking points, we can talk about how short life is and how easy it is to forget that as the old man tells Javi,
"I'm gonna be a name carved in stone before you know it, Javier. That'll be me. Letters on a rock that nobody wants to visit."
And that's why these things are so important. Why learning how to be level-headed and think things through or talk them out is such a big thing. We're all going to be in the same place 100 years from now, no matter how invincible we may think we are today. When that time comes, there may not be any who remember our name, save for reading it on a stroll through a cemetery. But our actions will ripple through those we interacted with while we were alive, and choosing to treat others with kindness and respect because we recognize that they were going through their own stuff at a given time will leave a positive impact long after we've shuffled off this mortal coil. After promising Papi that we'll take care of David and stick by him, we've moved back into the present, where the aftermath of Kate crashing into the wall of Richmond is making it really hard to keep that promise. Kate was able to use her plot armor to escape the exploding truck, and she is soon reunited with Javi and David after a fake-out where her zombie doppelganger nearly ate David. She's only happy to see one of the brothers though, and David seems very confused when she runs past him and embraces Javier. Even as the lovers celebrate, David seems to be either incredibly dense or in some kind of denial as he saves them from an approaching zombie and reminds them to focus on their surroundings. After saving Gabe and Clem from a group of zombies, they make their way into an apartment building, and we get the first real sign of trouble as Gabe rips into his father for turning into a cold-blooded killer. Once that's over, David, Gabe, and Clementine go down to secure the building and make sure no other entrances are compromised, and Javi and Kate go upstairs as Kate grapples with her guilt over the wall being breached. If she hadn't tried to be a hero, things might not have gotten so bad, and she blames herself. Now, her actions did directly contribute to the zombies getting in and probably got a lot of people killed, but there is so much more that led up to that happening that we can't really put the whole thing on her. It goes back to the ripple effect we talked about. If Joan doesn't start raiding, if one of those raiding parties hadn't destroyed the settlement Javier was in, if she hadn't decided unilaterally to execute David, all of these decisions and more led to Kate driving an oversized vehicle through a smokescreen and Molotov into a wall. A series of bad choices by a bunch of people led to what happened. And that really is the thing I don't think we recognize enough in this series and in this game. Going all the way back to Season 1, we can identify a steady series of bad choices. Choices where people didn't think things all the way through with enough logic. Kenny and Lily couldn't set aside their differences and work together on a plan to leave the motor inn before food became scarce, leading to a desperate decision to trust strangers who turned out to be cannibals, leading to the bandits who had been kept at bay by those cannibals, intimidating and tricking Ben into stealing supplies, and on and on and on. Yes, there are times where a split-second decision has to be made, and there isn't a lot you can do other than just deal with the consequences. But in the bigger picture, slowing things down and making better decisions, using logic to figure out the best solution in a given situation, you can actually prevent a lot of bad things from happening. Of course, This relies on those you work alongside and opposite also making smart, logical decisions. But the only thing that you can really control is you. We'll be expanding a lot more on logical decision making when we discuss Detroit Become Human in the near future. For now, there's another decision we have to make: whether or not to forgive Eleanor for becoming Benedict Arnold. Over dramatizations aside, it makes the most sense to forgive her and move on. She did a stupid thing by going to Joan, but she also had good intentions, and no one has clean hands at this point. It's another situation where you can hate the person for what they did or how badly you think they acted, or you can empathize and try to make things better in the future. But Eleanor is the least of our worries, to be honest, as two of David's soldiers, Fern and Rufus, are in the room as well, with Rufus laying on the couch dying from a zombie bite as Fern tries desperately to talk someone into cutting his arm off as she thinks that'll save him. To make matters worse, the pair had a daughter who apparently died in the chaos, and Fern winds up pointing a gun at Javier when she realizes she has nothing left to lose and that his actions are the reason for that. But David continues his descent into madness, breaking her arm and shooting Rufus in a matter-of-fact way that shows he has no empathy left for anyone. It's really a wild swing, but I think there's actually an explanation that doesn't involve bad writing, at least not as much. See, I think that whatever Joan talked to David about between taking him from the cell and walking him up to the gallows caused some kind of mental snap that he's fighting. One minute, he was probably sure he would be dying at the end of a rope, and the next, he was being told he was free. At the same time, freedom means once again leaving the militaristic life that he thrived in behind. Being exiled was worse for him than death, and in a desperate attempt to hold on to some semblance of the life he wanted, he started the fight that escalated out of control. A part of him knows that his actions were wrong, that he caused the death of those that he had promised to protect. But that part is struggling to stay afloat as he searches for order in the chaos. He also knows that a line was crossed, and that there's no going back to the way things were. Any chance of being a soldier or leader went out the window the moment he grabbed that gun on the stage. After shooting Rufus, he nearly shoots Fern before Gabe jumps in to stop him. Knocking Gabe away, the internal struggle resurfaces, and when no one in the group backs him up, the internal fight intensifies and he finds himself needing to get away. Javier finds him on the roof, teetering on the edge of the building as the soldier fights with the demon. A conversation between the brothers reveals a lot about the inner workings of David's mind, and we learn that he sees himself as nothing more than a soldier, while also recognizing that he needs to be more than that. He wants to change, has wanted to for years, but he doesn't really know if he can. And the fact that he has taken the time to reflect on his actions, not just the recent actions, but things that happened before the outbreak, says a lot about his character. He recognizes his failures and shortcomings and wants to improve on those. And that self-reflection and ability to admit where he messed up is something that many people struggle with. None of us is perfect, but it takes a lot of courage and strength to see those imperfections, and even more to actually work on improving. Whether you love or hate David, we can all learn from this moment and use it as an example for our own lives. As the brothers finish talking, the rest of the group makes their way to the roof, with Ava in tow. She's not happy with the fact that Javi picked Tripp over her to live, but that is the emotional side of her talking. Rationally, she should be thanking him because his decision is the reason she's alive, regardless of his reasons. She should also be directing her anger more at Joan than anyone else, because she was the one who put Javier in that situation to begin with, and no one had to die. That conversation aside, the group uses the rooftops and an old freeway overpass to make their way to the motor pool in an attempt to grab some construction equipment and seal the breach and save Richmond. On the way, we find out that David was actually more suspicious than he let on when Kate hugged Javi, that Gabe is disappointed in what he's seeing in his father, and that AJ was more difficult than David expected him to be. But all of that is overshadowed by one of the worst deaths in the entire series, as Ava is grabbed by a zombie while passing a car near the edge of the freeway, causing her to fall off the bridge and disappear. It happens in such a quick and unexpected fashion that you would think that she was just some background character that had no part in the main story to this point. It's just one more example of how sloppy some of the writing this season has been, and she deserved something a little bit better than here 1 minute, gone the next. But we'll leave more discussion about the writing for another video, because I'm going to talk about it and dig into what I think should have happened down the road. After a quick ride on a propeller of a downed helicopter, the group finds themselves clearing the motor pool and getting inside the garage to figure out the next step. And this is where David's inner monster returns, as he insists they should all just leave and abandon Richmond. This doesn't go over well with the group in general, but it especially goes south when everyone except Gabe refuses to go along with the new plan. Now, we could talk about how stupid it is that Gabe would decide to go along with his father, after everything we've seen to this point indicating he wouldn't do that. And we could sidestep the fact that David thinks that ordering everyone to do what he says is some kind of magic way of making things happen. But the worst part in my eyes has got to be the dramatic reveal that Kate and Javi are in love, and how it seems to completely blindside David. Here's a man who spent years assuming his family was dead, has said he knows how bad he was at being a father and a husband, knew that his relationship was in trouble before the dead started rising, and saw the way that Kate ran for Javi instead of him earlier in this very episode. Not to mention, he knows that the pair have spent the past 4 years together thinking he was dead. And now you're telling me he didn't once think that maybe Javi and Kate were in a relationship? David has got to be the most blind character in the history of media when it comes to relationships and how they work. That aside, I do actually like how the next part plays out with David's inner demon taking over as everything hits him all at once. His life has crumbled for a second time, and he just snaps and starts attacking Javier. And as Javier, you have the choice to egg him on and fight back, or honor your promise to your father by responding with love rather than punches. The moral thing to do is to let him hit you. I can already hear the pushback from people in the comments on this one. Javi doesn't deserve to be beaten. David is a monster. Javi needs to fight back and not risk being killed. But in reality, the only way Javier holds the high ground is to not give in to the temptation to hit his brother. This is where we remember that empathy we talked about earlier and put ourselves in David's shoes. That can be incredibly hard, just as it was when we examine someone like Carver or Larry, because it's easier to just write them off as bad people than it is to actually examine their motivations. David, for all his faults, does love his family. He mourned when he thought they died at the start of the outbreak, and his only thought was keeping them safe when they showed up at the gates of Richmond. Even as Javier was being kicked out, David was breaking the rules to try to give him food and supplies, as well as a vehicle to help him survive. He makes plenty of mistakes, but he's also been through hell, and he has a ton of unresolved trauma that drives those bad decisions. Yes, he likely would have killed Javier if not for Clementine's intervention. But Javi is also a fully grown man who can defend himself and is capable of taking that beating to prove a point in the same way their father was able to handle the pair of brothers insisting he seek treatment at the beginning of the episode. That aside, the confrontation brings the attention of zombies they distracted earlier, and the group winds up back in the garage, with David shutting the door on Javi, Kate, and Clem as he and Gabe stay outside and escape in a pickup truck. And now we have the biggest choice of the season, as Javi has to decide to either go after his brother or go with Kate and try to save Richmond. This isn't really a difficult choice though, as going after the two people who chose to leave doesn't make as much sense as going to try to save Richmond. The only reason to go after David and Gabe would be to get a certain outcome based on knowing what was going to happen, which Javier would have no knowledge of. David is capable of protecting Gabe, and Richmond needs more help in the moment. Clementine goes after Gabe and David while Javi and Kate make their way through the zombie herd on a bulldozer in what would undoubtedly be one of the most fun ways to get through the horde of zombies. They run into Jesus and a group of men on horseback as they approach the gate, and after getting inside and plugging the hole in the wall, the group is able to re-establish order and save the community. Clementine manages to catch up with David and Gabe, but it turns out they didn't get far as David crashed the truck as zombies overtook them. His injuries wound up being fatal, and Gabe had to put him down, but not before he told Gabe to relay a message to Javi, saying,
Take care of each other.
Kate and Javi make their way to the site of the crash, collecting David's dog tags and burying them as they say their goodbyes. The episode ends with a little retrospective on the events of the season, and with Kate and Javi planning for the future. We also get a chance to help Clementine by cutting her hair, and Dr. Lingard reveals AJ's last known location to wrap everything up in a decent bow. This season was probably one of the most difficult to cover in some ways, because of the poor writing and missed opportunities, but there was still plenty to talk about and learn from. We've got one more season to cover before starting into a new game in the Philosophy and Ethics series here on the channel, and I'm actually looking forward to a change of scenery. That doesn't mean we'll be done completely with The Walking Dead though, as there are still a ton of topics to cover in regards to the series, but it does mean we're going to have a lot of new situations and characters to talk about. But I want to know what decisions you made and what brought you to those decisions in the comments below. Did you go after Gabe and David? How did you handle the relationship between the brothers? Really put some thought into it and share your reasoning, as well as whether you think the decision you made was the right one or the wrong one. This series is all about asking the right questions and finding the best solutions. If you liked this video, make sure to hit the like button. For every like the video gets, one zombie is taken down by your favorite character. If you want to help support the channel in other ways while getting some cool perks like behind the scenes content and early access, I've got channel memberships and a Patreon. Next week, we're diving headfirst into the final season of The Walking Dead. But for now, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.